Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kish.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
So I actually managed to get the words Swahili and Romulan into the interview today. Isn't that great?
Great. What else is in your dictionary? Jesus.
Well, we're talking about all these different people and different kind of work, and they can't really communicate. And it was different languages. I thought it was funny. Are you telling me I'm not funny? I'm going to take that personally if you told me I'm not funny.
I'm German. I know what is funny and what's not. So you see.
Okay, you're German. You know what's funny. That's fine. Enough of this. Who's on the show today?
Yeah, so today we have the lovely Bill Schmarzo here, who his book's called, I have to read this a little bit because it's lengthy, The Economics of Data, Analytics and Digital Transformation, which is a great title, great book, and we had a great conversation. What were your takeaways?
He had this one expression about halfway through the interview. He said, if you don't have enough might moments, you won't have any breakthrough moments. And, we talk a lot about how important experimentation is. And that was really, really good. You do an experiment and it might work or it might not work. And experimenting and understanding that experimentation is all about learning, whether it succeeds or whether it doesn't hit the goal. So I thought that was a really, really good thing. The other thing we talked about very briefly is the fact that artificial intelligence, or AI, and big data and blockchain are indeed hugely overused words. And he gives some really good examples about how to communicate to teams and to business leaders what you're trying to achieve in business value without getting down into the guts of what the technology providers want to talk about. What were your takeaways?
Yes, I have sort of two. So first, when I first read the book, he's mentioning design thinking. Even so, the book is a lot about data and the economics of data. And he mentioned it here and there, and I was like, let's see how much he's really believing in it, or is it just an add-on? And then I think half of the time he actually talked about it. So I was super happy to have someone in the room who actually combines data science and design thinking. And he said, is not data science without design thinking, but design thinking helps you understand what the problem is, and we love the problem, not the solution, and really, really get closer to the problem. And then data science takes that and helps you to take the right steps to actually manifest that, which I think is a really great combination. And we had a bit of a chat about other practices and how do you get those people together. And then that's my second one, which follows from it. And he had a really great word for it, which is called organizational improv. And he said, look, and you could call it cross-disciplinary teams, but I think this really lovingly describes the mechanics and the dynamics behind it, where you say, right, you got all these people, all these different insights, you got behavioral scientists, data scientists, design thinkers and doers and whatever. But actually, what's really great in terms of skill set is you get these people together, and if it works right, they all play off each other like a jazz band, right? And everyone contributes something to it. And that's the beauty of it. And he really strongly believes in that. And that was great for me, someone who comes from data, especially big data, and said, look, big data is just not looking at data and then mindlessly going where the numbers are. You actually have to get a bunch of people together who understand the stories behind it and the human aspect behind it, and therefore then go and find the value and test it, experiment on it. And it's actually, bring them all together. Like, don't separate them out. Don't think that the qualitative and quantitative part is to separate it. Don't think that everything's just numbers and bottom line. That's coming from someone who lives and breathes economics of data. I found that brilliant and a beautiful description, organizational improv. I love that.
And he really has been an educator, a lot of his life. I think what you and I do with a lot of our clients is a certain level of education and storytelling, and that really comes through. He's got a huge amount of passion. He's a very good communicator. But Marcus, Twende Quanya Mogiano.
Ich glaube, wir sollten zum Interview gehen, denke ich mal so, ja, okay.
No, Twende Quanya Mogiano is let's go to the interview in Swahili.
You are learning too much. Let's go there. Before the interview, a quick word from our very first sponsor, Zencaster. We use Zencaster for all our audio and video recording, and it's a very nifty tool that splits up all the channels for very easy editing. Zencastr is used by 10% of all active podcasts. You can get 40% off the first 3 months and unlimited audio and video recordings with our special coupon code wickedpodcast. I repeat, Wicked Podcast for 40% off. And now the interview. Hello everyone, today we're here with Bill Schmarzo. Hello Bill, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm looking forward to the grilling and the inquisition here.
Yeah, it might just about be warm enough to have a barbecue. Let's see how we can do about that here from London. So let's start at the top as usual. Please, Bill, tell our audience who you are and why you wrote the book.
So, who I am, I think by nature I'm an educator. So I've held a number of different jobs as Chief Technology Officer and most recently Chief Innovation Officer at Hitachi Vantara. But all of my jobs that I've enjoyed and done well and have been ones where I'm basically a teacher or a mentor, whether it's to the team I'm building, to the customers I'm dealing with, or I also teach at a number of different universities, and that truly is teaching. So I always think of myself as first and foremost as a teacher. I've been blessed, right? I've been blessed with a bounty of situations across a wide and diverse set of very smart customers who are willing to share lots of their insights and hard problems and brainstorm with me. And I sort of think that my charter in life is to take what I've learned and to pass it on.
And then how did that turn into this book?
So this is my fourth book, and I'm actually gonna read the first two sentences in the preface because the book started with these two sentences. And so I know you've read the book, and so I don't want to bore people, but the first two sentences. The COVID-19 pandemic has been exacerbated by incomplete and opaque data, supporting suspect analytics, economic turbulence despite trillions of dollars spent in overly generalized financial interventions, and civil unrest from years of ineffective blanket policy decisions. The ability to uncover and leverage the nuances in data to make more effective and informed policy, operational, and economic decisions is more important than ever. Bottom line, I felt like as a race, as a society, as a culture, we could do better, and we need to do better. I think so. That those two sentences sent off everything, which is why the book really came off very quickly for me, because maybe you could say I was mad as hell about what was going on in the world. And I felt like, you know what, God darn it, I'm going to say something about it. I'm going to put it in a book. We can do better. We need to demand better. Here's how we can do better.
Well, that's one heck of an inspiration. And I have to say, you and I are both of a kind of similar kind of genre, I would suspect. And there are so many 50-cent words in those two sentences. I think I can buy at least 3 pizzas because that's a really complex, fully loaded 2 opening sentences. So moving kind of into some of the questions about this particular topic, lots and lots of data. Companies have either no data or too much data of the wrong kind of data. What about all these companies that start off saying, I've got a bunch of web logs, but I haven't got much else? Where's the starting point? How do they know enough data is enough to get started?
That reminds me of the question I get. I haven't got as much anymore, but I used to do, a keynote, and somebody would come to me and say, well, is my data big enough? And I was like, what does that sentence even mean? So the problem that organizations have overall isn't the volume of data they do or don't have. The problem is they aren't clear on what problems they're trying to solve. I mean, let's be very clear. How do you distinguish signal from noise in a data set, right? You have to know intimately the problem you're trying to solve. And that's probably the one step that almost every organization sort of glosses over. They'll write down a sentence or two. We're trying to improve customer retention by, that's our goal. Okay, well, what are the KPIs and metrics against which you're going to measure progress and success? Who are the stakeholders who need to be involved in that process? What are the entities around which you want to build analytics? What are the decisions you're trying to drive? What are the costs of the false positive and false negatives? What are the business benefits? There's a zillion set of questions that need to be addressed before you ever put science to the data. And by the way, that isn't You don't need to be Google to go through that process to figure out what problem we're trying to solve. You just need to spend the time with the right people in a thoughtful process to really make sure you really are clear about what problem we're trying to solve, who's it for, and why it's important.
And even before you turn AI or algorithms loose on the data, having the right problem statement, make sure you collect the right data.
It,
I mean, we talk oftentimes about love the problem, not the solution,
yep.
meaning get the problem statement right.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that has to happen up front, and of course, as you know from my book, I'm a big believer in design thinking because I think design thinking is a way to drive that upfront definition process so that everybody who has a voice in the problem has a chance for their voice to be heard. And we know that AI models try to optimize across an AI utility function. And the more robust that utility function is, that is the more dimensions you're trying to optimize that, the more effective it's going to be, where effective is realized and relevant and meaningful and quantifiable, right? So design thinking for me is a way that you bring that process in to make sure you really thoroughly understand the problem you're going after. Especially the one area that people tend to skip over is what are the costs of the false positive and false negatives? What's the cost of being wrong? Because the data scientists, when they start applying science to the data, they want to know, well, is a 79% accuracy rate good enough? Well, it depends. Depends what the cost of being wrong is, right? 79% chance that that condo in Miami might not collapse, probably not good enough, right? So you really need to think through, and this is hard. This is a hard step because you force people to think through what are all the ways this thing could go wrong. And even if it's only got a 0.01% chance, you probably want to think and articulate that. And so again, a lot of work has to happen before you ever put science to the data.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because obviously I'm smiling here as a kind of design thinker by trade, and I've asked people that before. It's like, why do you do this? Do you even know what you're trying to solve here? Um, so, and that gets me straight into maybe one of my favorite problem areas, which is if you want to get an organization into engaging and committing into the different economic impact of data, and an investment into like, well, let's build this or let's see if that thing is a thing. How do you get the dynamic between, let's say, then leadership who makes the decision in science of the budget and the initial team to say, uh, okay, I think we can make the decision? Because as you said, what's the cost of being wrong? No one likes to be wrong. At the same time, we're living now in a world where a lot of more things are going to be going wrong before they go right.
Yep.
And leadership is less and less in the position to have enough information to ever make a decision because they just don't have enough information. But they have hundreds of, if not thousands of people often working for them that could actually help figure this out and experiment it out. So how do you talk to leadership about doing the investment in data, but saying, but I don't expect you as leadership to have all the right informations there, enough information there to de-risk enough. But I tell you that this is now more and more than ever the job of your teams to help you de-risk that, to help set the visions of what it is, to help explore the personas and all these things. Do you have that kind of conversation, or how do you manage that when you can talk to people like that?
So two things come to mind.
Mm.
Number one, how do you get the business's attention? How do I get the CEO and the C-suite really interested in what I can do with data and analytics? And that starts by making sure I really understand how the organization creates value. How do they make money? Right? I like to say that no executive I've ever talked to gives a shit about the 3 V's of big data. Volume, variety, velocity, they don't care. They want the 4 M's of big data. Make me more money, right? So let's figure out where the organization, how they make money. By the way, and the term value is a more appropriate term than money, because we're starting to see organizations take a more holistic look at the word value, right? It's not just financial value, it's also operational, customer, environmental, society. There's all kinds of variables of value, and we want to define all those areas. So the first place to start is you need to start with, how does the organization create value? And that takes some legwork. That takes working with the executive team. Not the data science team isn't going to tell you how they make value. It's going to be the executives saying, well, we make value by providing a customers, delighting our customers, releasing new products that really build, blah, blah, blah. They know how they make values, right? So that's the first starting point. You're spot on. You got to start where the organization believes, or executives believe, they drive value. Your second point's trickier, though. That's a conversation you can have. You've got to be willing to engage with executives and drive that conversation. I think I love doing that. I always think it's interesting is to watch the organization bat around how they define value, because most executives aren't clear on it. So again, I love that process. I love throwing ambiguity into a situation and watch people's heads blow up and then come back around, right? But the second part of the question was really hard. How do you create an environment of continuous learning and adapting? Right? You're spot on. We're going to make a lot of small decisions that are going to be wrong, and they're only wrong if we don't learn from the decisions. We're going to try this, right? You said the word experimentation. The best organizations, in my opinion, are those organizations that can adopt and culturally adapt to the concepts of experimentation. They have an abundance mentality, then they realize that sometimes their best ideas are not going to come from Mahogany Row. They're going to come from the people at the front line of the operations, the people who are engaging with customers or running the operations. It's how do you create that environment where all ideas are worthy of consideration, which, by the way, doesn't mean all ideas are good, right? But you have to create this environment where you're basically always learning. Now, there's responsibility on the person who tries something. Before you try something, you want to be thoughtful about what you're going to try, how you're going to measure success, what are the costs of being wrong, what happens if I'm wrong, what I hope to learn. And then once you've done something, whether you're successful or not, you have to share it with the community. You have to create this community collaboration, this collaborative intelligence across the organization. But if the organization is afraid to make mistakes, right, then they are afraid to learn. And if they're afraid, I like to say, if as an organization, if you don't have enough might moments, that is something that might work. If you don't have enough might moments, you'll never have any breakthrough moments. And so it's all this power of embracing this experimentation and willing to try and test and fail and learn and try again. It's the heart of the scientific method. Heck, that thing's been around for friggin' ever. But now we want organizations to adopt that, because we now have on the analytics side AI and ML models that can continuously learn and adapt. That's good, right? We can build autonomous assets, autonomous cars, autonomous trains or tractors that continuously learn. Well, guess what, folks? On the other side of the equation, we have these things called humans. They can continuously learn and adapt as well. So what happens when you bring together an AI ML model that can continuously learn and adapt with humans who have been empowered to continuously learn and adapt? That's when you have a culture of transformation, because now everybody's empowered and you're unleashing the greatness in everybody in the organization, not just the greatness of those sitting in Mahogany Row.
So you went on a nice kind of segue there about value. And I always say value is described as one or more of five things. How do you make money, save time, add joy, or remove pain? Because if you're not talking about one or more of those five things, you're not describing value. And, I don't think it was more than 3 years ago, but definitely 3 years ago, there was this huge movement, and digital transformation was indeed all the buzz. And every executive in every boardroom wanted to know, what's our digital transformation strategy? And marketing agencies made a killing because they defined digital transformation as, let's build an app. That's what we need. We've got a website. We need an app. You go through quite a nice part of the book where you talk about, the maturity of big data business models and what do you get to in the end, and what is digital transformation by your definition. Tell the audience how you think that maps? Is it really just build an app?
No. So it's a great point. So there's a difference between digital transformation and digitalization. And a lot of organizations get those confused. One of my favorite examples is taking a meter reader who comes to my house once a month with a pad of paper, looks at how much energy, how much electricity I've used, writes it down on a pad of paper, right, and submits that back to corporate, and comes back next month and does it again, right? We've digitalized that process by putting a internet-enabled device on my meter reader that's sending a continuous stream of information about the meter, about what's going on and how much electricity I'm consuming, by what time of day, by what day of week, all the time, all the way back to the to the utility, so they can optimize load balance and do all that kind of important stuff. That's not digital transformation. That's digitalization. That is taking a formerly analog process and turning it into a digital process. Now, it kicks off a whole bounty of data around which you can drive and optimize all kinds of decisions, like I said, like load balancing and maintenance and rebates and what kind of appliances I want to give people. Right? It's very valuable. But to me, digital transformation is about creating the culture of continuous learning and adapting. And I actually think that the term digital transformation is really it's really wrong. It shouldn't have the word digital in front of it. Maybe it's called cultural transformation, because we just went through a transformation with pandemic, right? It had digital ramifications where we digitalized a lot of our interactions, but it was a pandemic-driven transformation. We've had society unrest-driven transformations. We've had major storms and climate change. There's all kinds of things that are driving transformation, because the one thing about transformation is it never stops. Right? I love the question. Have you achieved digital transformation? Yes, we have. Really? How can you achieve something where there is actually no endpoint? Because transformation it's what, as humans, we are constantly subjected to the world economically, healthcare wise, weather wise, right? Constant change.
Exactly. And excuse me to tap in there like that. So that brings me to another thing that sits right in that. Because having been a lot of change and transformation projects with various labels on them, one of the other things I always tumble over, and I'd like to have your opinion on, is so there's often the argument of efficiency and effectiveness, right? Or most of the time it just talks about efficiency. And efficiency for me in my head is just you're polishing an old box, save a bit of money, and that's it. You never really open yourself up from the get-go to tap into something new, right? Which also goes, I think, easily down the route of like, if you produce data and if you measure, you might want to look at measuring something new, different, right? And if you just do efficiency, you actually probably not even consider that. You measure the same old stuff, you stick with the same data sets, and you just polish some numbers. How do you get then, therefore, to propose or get into a narrative of where you say, well, let's look at effectiveness. Let's step out of that. How can you step out of that? How do you with data? And what are normally how the conversations you have in that respect to shift that?
So the difference between efficiency and effectiveness is a difference between optimization and reinventing, in my opinion. And what I found, one of my favorite tools for contemplating how organizations can not just optimize the value creation process, but how do you reinvent it, is the consumer journey map in design thinking. When you go through a journey mapping process and you think about for the persona that you're mapping it for, and by there's multiple personas, right? So there's a lot of work here. You're identifying they've got something they're trying to accomplish. Maybe it's buying a house or buying a car or selecting a college or whatever it might be. You walk them through those 5 stages of the journey map, and you're going through identifying what are the high points in that journey map, what are the decisions that drive joy, and what are the decisions that drive pain, and how do I take how do I amplify the pain decisions, and how do I eliminate the pain decisions, right? So one of the exercises we did in my class was we had them build a journey map for going out to eat, right? So you think about, there's the epiphany of when I'm going to go out to eat, and there's the joy of deciding where you're going to go. There's the pain in the butt of trying to make a reservation. There's the pain of actually driving there. There's the joy of once you're there selecting and eating. And there's the pain of having to get home. Right? So you walk through this process and we say, okay, now how can we amplify the joy parts, right? And think about, what can data and analytics do to help to amplify that? But what can we also do with data and analytics to create and reinvent and eliminate the pain points? Like driving to the restaurant and finding parking is a pain. How did we solve that? Uber, right? Uber came out and said, that's a pain point for you. I'll take it on. And now it's no longer a pain point, right? Making a reservation, right? Got in a line waiting to see if they got a table available. How do I eliminate that? The app, Open Table. Go to Open Table. You got a spot available? Click it. Oh, by the way, I even get points. I get free meals too and such. So I think design thinking is a great tool set and a mindset for helping organizations really walk in the shoes of their customers to intimately understand where is value created, the gains, where is value impeded, the pains, and what can I do to monetize both of those by having superior insights, customer product and operation insights buried or generated from my data and analytics.
Okay. And I think if you're a mature organization, you might be open to kind of hearing that kind of a message. I have the pleasure and the pain of working with a wide range of startups. And startups think they understand everything. They can spot every opportunity. They know exactly what to do. And what they do is they do a pitch deck. And on page 1, it says AI. And on page 2, it says big data. And on page 3, it says blockchain. Yeah. And because I'm a blockchain guy, it had to say blockchain on page 3.
There you go.
We have just so literally used and abused the terms AI and big data that I find a lot of people, you say those words and the eyes roll into the back of their heads and it's like, it's too complex, I don't understand what it means, or it's all just magic or whatever. How do you break through that and put AI and big data in terms that business leaders and teams can get their heads around?
So it is important that executives understand. Yeah. Taking executives through a process to help them understand to envision the realm of what's possible with data and analytics is important. But there's also some really simple definitions. Here's my definition of data science. Data science is about identifying those variables and metrics that might be better predictors of performance. Period. That's it. That's all I need to know about AI. That's all I need to know about ML. That's all I need to know, right? All we're trying to do, and if you want to go one step further, all we're doing with AI and ML is trying to identify and codify the trends, patterns, and relationships that are buried in the data. And then once we know those trends, patterns, then we're going to apply those to the problems you're going after. But I do think you need to help the executives understand at an empowerment level what these things can do. But by God, don't try to teach an executive what AI is. I don't think I can explain what AI is, right? It's so and don't even get me going on blockchain. I'm like the confusion cloud will just hang over my head. But you're right. This starts, if I can be so blunt, this starts with technology vendors who just love to sell the new shiny thing. Look at this new data storage, this data mesh, data lake, right? Look what I can do with this thing. It's a data mesh. You should be knocking down my door because I got a data mesh. And people are like, they're like Tom Hanks in the movie Big. Have you ever seen the movie Big? Right? Yep. Tom Hanks is the movie Big. He's watching the adults play with that building and turn it into a robot. And he looks around, he raises his hand and goes, I don't get it. I don't get it. Why is that important? And what happens is that we have these technology vendors, startups, one of the worst violators of this, who come in and say, look, I got AI. It builds on top of big data. And underneath is blockchain, all this stuff. And somebody needs to raise their hand and say, I don't get it. Why is it important to me? And so there's I believe a huge opportunity for technology vendors to change the conversation. that they could have a conversation with their customers to help the customers unleash the economic value of these technology investments, of all the money they've invested in data and analytics, to help them unleash it. You just need to change the conversation by rotating it. Instead of talking about data as the driver, it becomes, in technology, the driver becomes data, and technology becomes the enabler. But the problem I'm going after is this: they don't want the shiny thing. They want this, and if the shiny thing can help them get that, show me how the shiny thing can help me get there. In fact, what we should do,
Yeah.
we should probably replace anytime someone uses the word AI, big data, blockchain, quantum computing, just replace it with shiny thing. And then that's
Yeah. So when I look at that, and I think it's great when you, yeah, God, we love to rant. And we could do that for hours. But I want to look at something then in particular around data, because you mentioned design thinking a lot, and I think it's great to have someone on board who's is comfortable with both places, because not everyone is. Looking in particular at design thinking, who has probably a more propensity to look at not just quantitative data but qualitative data, right?
Mhm.
And qualitative data sometimes has a problem putting itself onto a measurable number and so on. How do you see the dynamic between quantitative qualitative data in the economics of data, and sort of convincing people that the qualitative aspects are measurable or not, or they're there and they're relevant? How do you puzzle this together?
All right. Let me. So the qualitative data can also be measurable. It might require some a little more due diligence in it. I have this analogy that in baseball they look for pitchers that have resilience and
Mm,
toughness. Now I can't put a yardstick on them or take a picture of them to figure out how resilient they are, but I can put them into situations, no win situations, to see how they respond. And so if I'm creative about what it is I'm trying to measure, I can find ways to even measure the soft metrics. But it does require. This is why I think design thinking and data science are so complementary. I believe that they are different sides of the same coin. That data science really, in order for the models to be more effective, we have to be able to bring in and quantify the soft data as well. Sentiment and people's response. This is why we're starting to see, a growing realization that environmental and society concerns are values that organizations need to measure. Well, how do you measure them? Well, we maybe not have done that much in the past, but now we need to think about it. And by the way, there's not one metric. There's probably a number of metrics that all kind of go like this. Some of them probably even collide with each other, but that's okay, because if we don't have friction, we don't have learning. So we need to have this thing. So I believe organizations, you can actually start to quantify some of the softer measures. It may not be as exact as knowing that that particular item weighs 2.7653 ounces, but I don't need that level of accuracy when I'm trying to measure people's sentiment, when I'm trying to measure their own self-worth and their heart and their resilience and other things that I think are that might be important for what I'm trying to predict.
yeah. It's interesting because just as we're living in a world that seems to go more polarized and more kind of black and white, everything else underneath seems to be developing more into an area where, right and wrong doesn't exist anymore. It's all sort of just a bit better, and there's a lot of gray levels to it. So, and unfortunately, as always, we have more questions than time. So here's our last question already, and this time was definitely flying. It's not often to have someone in the room who both talks data science and design thinking, and there's plenty of other practices fighting for the space to do problem solving, right? To understand the problem better, to point at a couple of options of what we might try to get ahead of it and tackle things better. Maybe to ask you to be as specific as you potentially could be. If you talk about data science team and you're in an organization and you talk about design thinkers, how would you put them together in the process? Because I know you have phases in your process, and I know probably speak very different languages, and I know they do. I used to be a developer, so I got both things a bit in my blood. But I know how tricky it can be. What would you do in order to put people together in a room, or after how would you connect both worlds? And I'm not
One
just
group
talking
speaks
maybe design thinking and that. I'm talking about enterprise architecture and all these different practices that look at values and information and behavioral science and all these things.
one
There you
speaks
go.
Swahili and the other speaks Romulan.
There you go.
Let's
so,
stay nerdy.
so we've created something we call organizational improvisation. And what organizational improvisation is, the ability to bring together a lot of different perspectives into an environment and create a set of frameworks around which they can all improvise. Think about a great jazz quartet, trumpet player, piano player, saxophone, whatever you have, right? And how they're all riffing off each other. Think about, in my case, the U.S. women's Olympic soccer team and how they move across the field. And there's not one person at the top saying, Julie, you move here, and Sandy, you go here, you kick over here, right? No, you create this sort of organizational improv, this team of teams concept. But there are some foundations. You do need to have a common language. You need a common glossary. And so we create a common glossary. These are the terms that we are going to use in this meeting, right? We also create common intent. What it is that we're trying to do? And we want to make sure we bring all the different perspectives into this thing early so that we can make sure that we all understand what intent means to this person versus this person and that person. Right. By the way, understand that these projects don't typically die because of technology. They typically die because of passive aggressive behavior in the organization, because of somebody whose voice needed to be heard didn't get heard, and they're going to get you. And then you create a common framework, very much design thinking plus data science, which you can evolve and learn, and because you're going to try lots of different things. And this is a process that you don't bring the business stakeholders in, you interview them, and then they go away, and 6 months later you throw something over the transom and say, "Hey, did I hit it?" And they go, "No." No, you're think about how good design thinking is. You're prototyping and testing constantly. You're throwing different things. Does this model work? Is this the right way to produce? So you create this, excuse me, this culture of organizational improv. We have data science pods that include data scientists, data engineers, business subject matter experts, value engineers, and design thinkers. They sit all in the same team. Because not only is design thinking great at helping people to ideate, they're also great at leveraging little tricks and techniques to drive organizational alignment around the problem you're trying to solve. So again, big fan of chapter 9 in the book. It's my favorite chapter in the book, which, by the way, I wrote the whole book, got to the end and said, I'm missing something. I'm missing something critical. I've done the technology and the data really well, but I've missed, I think, what is the most important part of the book, so I wrote chapter 9 because I thought I had really missed it. Chapter 9 is my favorite chapter. In fact, chapter 9 may be the next book I write. I might even call the next book chapter 9, because it's about how do you empower these people? And again, this is where design thinking plays a major role, where you can really drive collaboration, and the concepts around organizational improvisation are game changing, but you need to ensure that everybody can be successful. One last point on this. When you create organizational improv, you have to prepare everybody at some point to be ready to lead. Everybody's required to lead at some time. You don't know when your turn might be. So you have to educate and train people, and then you have to empower them. It's your turn to lead, right? By the way, if you fail, what did you learn? How do we do it better next time? Failing is not punishing. Failing is learning.
Lovely. Great words to wrap this up. Thank you, Bill, so much for your time. We're out of time, and we could have talked to you for hours. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, guys. That was great questions. It was really fun. As you can tell, I love this topic. It is what really gets me fired up.
You've been listening to the Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.